Tigard. It's been a couple weeks since we've had a Fireside Chat listening session with me, the mayor of Tigard. You'll notice that I am on my own tonight. Don't have Police Chief McAlpine. She actually had a chat with the chief last evening, and so we're giving her the evening off. Definitely want to thank you for joining me to discuss what's on your mind and what's on the mind of our community. If you have questions for me, please make sure you submit them in the comments box, and we will do our best to not miss any of them. If we do, just let us know at the end of the event, and we'll make sure we still get you an answer. But we will be diligent about trying to make sure that we get to all of them and don't miss one. Similar to previous events, we're recording this event, and it will be available and posted on the city's YouTube channel after the event. I want to make a couple opening remarks before I take your questions and just highlight a couple things that we're working on and or looking for your input on. So the first is the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We are looking for feedback on that. What park improvements particularly would you like to see, and what recreation programs are most important to you? So we're asking for your feedback on that, and there is a lot of outreach online that's been done and set up for us to receive that feedback. So please take a few minutes to share your answers on the survey link that you'll find in the chat box. Also want to give you a little bit of an update. I think the chief of police launched this, or indicated that it's been launched last night at her chat with the chief. But I just want to make sure that everybody knows and hears me notify the community that the accountability and transparency is really critical to our police department and to the city as a whole around policing, but frankly around everything. And the police department has recently launched a transparency page. It's a single source, single point to find all information relating to policing in Tigard, including data and policies, and the page is going to be maintained and updated regularly. So that's a step forward. We had started to put some materials on the Community for All page, and I think the Community for All page still exists, but this is going to be a permanent fixture on the police department's website. So wanted to make sure you know about that. Last on the COVID front, I want to make sure that you all know that we are remaining in phase 1 at this time. We continue to have some challenges around crowding in parks. And to be honest with you, if you get details or hear from the Washington County Public Health folks, they will tell you that most of the transmissions that they can trace of COVID-19 are coming back to large events or semi. I mean, I guess what we consider large now is different than 6 months ago, probably. But it's events like, a backyard wedding where there were a bunch of people, or those kinds of things where folks are in close contact. And so just so you're aware, that is where the transmissions are happening in Washington County, is in events like that. Another highlight about COVID-19 that I want to make sure the community is aware of, and particularly the business community, is that we now have 10,000 KN95 masks to distribute to businesses in Tigard. There will be more details coming out next week, but we are trying to do what we can to help the business community with the costs associated with complying with COVID-19 and the impacts of that, and so that is another step that we are taking. Packed with Pride is still distributing food boxes. They're distributing 800 to 850 food boxes per week. They're looking for continued community support and additional community support to continue their efforts. I was actually talking with Ben Bowman, one of the leaders of that effort, in the last week, and he was sharing with me that some of the volunteers that have been running that are just getting to a point where they believe in the mission, but they're personally getting a little fatigued. He, as an individual, is spending every Friday night doing 2 to 3 hours of logistics before the Saturday morning deliveries of the food boxes. And, they've been doing that since March. And if you can imagine working full time and then coming home on a Friday night, and as much as you believe in the mission, and I don't think Ben would ever stop, but the reality is they need to have some sustainable help with other individuals to make that a program that can continue in our community. Last, I want to make sure that that our entire group of community members that care about public safety are providing input on our transformation, the Public Safety Transformation Commission. The council has put out a request for feedback. We've received feedback from close to 200 community members. And at next week's city council meeting on Tuesday night, we as the council will be reviewing and making adjustments to the Transformation Commission proposal that the community's been commenting on, and then planning to move forward, I anticipate. I want to thank the hundreds of community members that have provided their input. I've spoken to many of you individually on either the phone or via email, and then we have received many others in writing that we are taking in and really taking to heart. So we are going to take your questions now, and thank you for letting me make some introductory remarks. We have a question from the Durham Road neighborhood. The neighborhood is asking, what's the latest on Tigard Cares? Will there be additional funding? So there was a second round that was planned and being worked through. I actually need to get an update for you specifically on where exactly we are in that process. But yes, we were able to, based on some funding from the county and some additional assistance that was backfilling some of the money we'd already spent, we made the decision to continue forward with a second round of Tigard Cares. Let's see, Mary, if we didn't get the feedback turned in, can we still submit it?
Transformation Commission.
On the Transformation Commission, absolutely. In fact, we're taking feedback, and that's partly why I'm announcing it now. We are taking feedback through, I think the deadline is right about tomorrow or so. But we're not that rigid, so we'll take your feedback. To have it considered seriously at the council meeting Tuesday, we probably need it by Saturday or Sunday, realistically. So Mary, hopefully that answers your question, and I appreciate you being engaged and willing to provide us with your feedback. So thank you. Do we have other questions rolling in? This is such a change for me. The last 2 or 3 or 4 of these have been jam-packed with more questions than I could track, and we, in a couple cases, missed a few. So I appreciate that. Hopefully, this is both reflective of a nice summer evening that people are enjoying in the Tigard community. Started out a little cool today, a little wet, but I think the day ended up pretty nice. So hopefully folks are out enjoying that, and I always want them engaged with the city and with what we have to say, but I also want people to enjoy. So Kevin Wright comments, really cool about the Transparency Police page. So thank you, Kevin, for that feedback. We'll make sure the chief hears that. Rachel, last summer, parts of Durham Road were sealed, but now they're doing it again. Can you shed some light on what they're doing? So Rachel, that's a good question. I know what was happening this year, and I'm trying to remember what went on last year. I actually thought last year, my memory, and that this is not, I'm not going to say I have an unfailable memory here, but I believe last summer there was a bunch of slurry seal work that was done right, like up to Durham Road. And there may have been some small parts of Durham Road that were done, but this year is the full meal deal for Durham Road all the way down. So that's I know what's happening this year, and I remember parts of last year. Cleon, will someone please do something about the lady in the SUV that hasn't moved in months on Fruing Avenue across from the apartments, a few hundred feet from Pacific Highway? So Cleon, we'll take that feedback, and the city recorder's making a note right now, and staff will follow up with you on that. Thank you for that feedback. You might want to send an email in with a little more detail about the SUV. Perhaps the plate, description, color of the vehicle would be helpful, just to make sure we get the right follow-up there. Let's see, Marianne, what does the process of selecting the members of the Transformation Commission look like going forward? I know several community members who've expressed interest and are unsure of how to proceed. So first, the council's got to decide, based on the feedback that we've gotten, whether the composition as we have it is as it should be. I think it will look very similar to what has been proposed, but things can change. We've certainly gotten some feedback. We've gotten some interesting feedback, I think, about the composition of the group, both positive and suggestions for change. I'm gonna guess that you're really that question is focused on the members of the sort of community at large, and that is actually one of the topics we've been seeking feedback about. So I'll highlight that now, because if you have feedback about that, we want to hear it. So we actually put in the proposal two different methods. One would be a council appointment, kind of like our standard approach now to filling board and commission positions in the city, whether it's the library board or the budget committee or the planning commission. We have a process that involves some interviews with both staff member that is the leader of that area, and then multiple members of the city council typically. And then we make a recommendation to the entire council, make an appointment. So that's the typical process. This is for a couple different reasons. I think I've really been not concerned, but paying particular attention to how people are selected. And this, I think, is a topic where it's really critical that we get it both right, and that we make sure that people that have traditionally not been able to participate have an opportunity to participate. We have a very structured way of getting input at city meetings, and it requires that you show up on an evening when some people may not be able to make it, and or either may have childcare or need to be feeding their family, etc. So it's important to me that our selection process truly gives the opportunity for everybody in the community to participate. So the second, or the alternative that I had suggested that the council consider was more of I want you to realize, when I was putting this together, it was when COVID seemed like it was headed in a positive direction, and we're now kind of going COVID opposite. So this may sound crazy in the current COVID climate, but just realize that it was being proposed at a different point in time. And the proposal that we're seeking input on as an alternative to the council appointment is to use some sort of a caucus style, probably done electronically now, but either that or in a socially distanced way, where everyone that might want to be considered would speak to the group, and then of whatever community members want to show up, and then those community members would select the six, if it ends up being six, the six members that are representing the public and the community at large. So those are the two options, and please feel free to give us feedback. I've heard actually really compelling reasons to do both. So that hasn't made my thinking any more clear yet. Hopefully from the feedback from 200 people, we'll get some more clarity there. Cleon, how did you get a street named after you between 100th and 103rd? Do I have a street named after me? I'm not aware of that.
It's breaking news.
Cleon, I'll have to go drive by that on my way home. Is it spelled the same way? I'm curious. 100th and 103rd. I don't know.
You got Mary's question here too.
Oh, and I missed one. Mary, if you know of a person of color who has negative experiences in Tigard but is reluctant to share them with police or you, what would you tell them? Mary, great question. And, this is, I've been, I guess, somewhat lucky so far that I have been able to hear and people have felt comfortable sharing a bunch of experiences with me, and you as a community are going to be hearing more about those stories as we work forward, because I've had a lot of members of the community respond recently related to the Transformation Commission that, either racism or systemic racism doesn't exist in Tigard. And the stories that I've been able to share publicly, I've asked for permission to share them, and the ones that I've gotten permission for, we've had a couple community members sort of criticize them for not being, serious enough or similar to things that, might happen to someone who was, in one case they were comparing the sidewalk chalk example that I'd provided a couple times because I had permission to share that story from the person that it happened to, that they were comparing that to an incident that involved some, I think, Catholic students in an anti-abortion protest, and comparing those. I won't get into my analysis of that, but I will just tell you that there are very compelling stories in our community. And Mary, I would suggest that individual find someone that they trust that can get the information to the leaders in our community of some sort. Maybe that would be you. If they're comfortable with you, they could either write their experience down or, hopefully they'd be comfortable with meeting. We actually had an African-American gentleman who asked to, after, I think actually a next door post, Representative Doherty lives in his neighborhood, and she brought this concern to our attention, and this individual was willing and interested in meeting with us. And I spent about an hour and a half last night hearing his story just about an experience in the last 2 weeks in Tigard in a neighborhood that is near where Representative Doherty lives. So, Mary, if people are comfortable with that, I would hope that they would feel comfortable. If they don't, we still want the information, and I would hope they can find some trusted individual that could bring it to us. Let's see. Dane, what is the inclination of the Parks Department coming up in the next decade? I would love to see more parks developed versus improving those we have. My part of the Metzger neighborhood doesn't have access to a park, and Steve has parkland ready to go. So this is a serious challenge for us. Part of it started about a decade ago when the council, with 5 different city councilors and mayor, had seen the economic downturn that occurred in 2007 and 2008 and decided to try to capitalize on that and buy property when it was cheap. But what that meant, and it got us a good deal on a bunch of parkland, but it did not fund the development of every single one of those parks. And so for our community to know, this is a major challenge for us. Having enough resources to build out and take care of and develop the parkland that we have is a big challenge. And I don't have an instant fund that we can just throw more money at the parks capital improvement program. But it is a high priority and something we're trying to balance. That is also the kind of thing that as we are moving through the potential economic downturns with COVID, that may end up being on the margin in something that unfortunately we have to put off further. I don't want to do that, but we also have to live within our means, and I also can't make money appear that doesn't exist. So that's a tough balance. And Dane, it sounds like you're pretty knowledgeable about the parks program, and so make sure that you are providing your input on the Parks and Recreation Master Plan I talked about earlier. The comment period for that is open now. Jeremy, the new 6-story housing project on the Triangle, which was just approved, over 200 parking spaces. How is the city preparing to deal with the traffic? Where exactly is it going to be located? The woods where by McDonald's, I assume. So I think, Jeremy, I don't know for certain which project you're referring to. I think I know, so I'm going to respond with that. It is actually planned for the corner of Dartmouth and 72nd in the corner that's kind of opposite of Walmart. So that would be the northeast corner of that intersection. Every project is required to meet Tigard City Code around traffic, and that means for a project like that, typically, that there's a fairly significant traffic analysis that's done. That's actually how 72nd in the Dartmouth area got, and even some of Pacific Highway got a bunch of improvements a number of years ago when Walmart opened up, actually, just to close that loop. That project or that construction triggered some major improvements to a number of streets. So I think I answered where it's going to be located. It is not. I'm not aware of something directly that you're referring to that large that's going to be. I don't know of anything specific with the woods near McDonald's. Let's see. Is that Erion? E-R-I-O-N.
Yeah.
Arian? How has COVID derailed any of your plans or changes since being in office? If there's been any barriers. Wow. I think the thing that I run into the most right now, and you heard me struggle with it earlier, is that our council has a desire to have a very open dialogue and conversations with our community. We've made a big commitment to that over the last couple of years. I've personally made a big commitment to that. In COVID world, that's very difficult to do. It looks more like this instead of sitting down and meeting with people in person, and it's just harder to connect with people that way. But that's just one example. There are impacts that COVID is having in our operations in virtually every department, and we've had to lay some staff off, not hire seasonal staff, just approach our work very differently in almost every department. And that's going to continue. I think the other thing that remains to be seen is what the long-term economic impact is going to be, both to the individuals that live in Tigard, the businesses in Tigard, and the entire community and the city itself. So it's having a pretty dramatic impact. I see Cleon says there's a Jason Lane. Okay, so I'll have to go find Jason Lane. Very cute, Cleon. I appreciate that. Marianne, when can we expect a decision to be made on how transfer... Is that an additional question?
Yeah.
When can we expect a decision to be made on how Transformation Commission members will be appointed? I would anticipate that will happen at next Tuesday's City Council meeting. I think we're going to have to make a decision so that we can start that process quickly. Let's see. Veronica, does the City of Tigard have a community engagement coordinator as the City of Tualatin does? If so, who is it? And if not, why not? So that's a very specific question and a very specific title. I am going to have the staff provide an answer to you for that one since it's so specific. Jeremy, Steve, Street Park, yep. I know I keep asking, but that's how it's done, right? Yep, absolutely, Jeremy. Don't back down and don't give up. Continuing to push is the right thing to do and what I expect you to do. And yes, you'll keep asking. Please do. And thanks for mowing yesterday. Okay, glad that we got the mowing done there. All right, Well, that's a good run of straight questions there. Keep them coming. Want to make sure that we use our time wisely and that we get as many of your questions answered as possible. So thank you for engaging in this discussion with me and providing input and being so generous with your time. So do we have any new ones rolling in? I know that we've got an upcoming council listening session with both Councillor Lube and Councillor Newton upcoming in a couple of weeks. So we will ask you to participate then. So we have a question. What is from Steve? What is the latest on the Southwest Corridor? This is a good topic, and I think the most interesting recent happenings are related to the potential funding for the Southwest Corridor in particular. So there's a couple updates I would give you. One is that we're working, and our staff are working really hard with TriMet around the station designs in Tigard, and frankly, we as a city are having to push TriMet pretty hard to make sure that the station designs meet the needs of our community and are effective and don't leave parcels of land that don't allow appropriate redevelopment and the kinds of things that we want to see to help us achieve our future vision as a city. So that's one thing that's underway, and there's a lot of work that's going into that. The other thing that I would share is that the Metro Council just put or referred the funding package that will include the Southwest Corridor onto the November ballot, and so that was a big decision that they made, and they have after doing a lot of research and what they've done a lot of work on in the last couple of years, and we've all participated in, is what are the key projects that need to be done transportation wise. And so that's been a very robust set of input and dialogue over a couple year period of time. More recently, they've again been working on how to fund it, and they concluded after a lot of review, research, and dialogue that they were going to refer an employer payroll tax. And it's under 1%, but it's I think it was 0.75 of 1% that they were going to refer to voters in November. So that's Steve, if you've got specific questions I didn't cover in that answer, please let me know. But those are kind of like the big things that are happening right now. Did the police budget decrease this year? Well, that's an interesting question given what was published in the Tigard Times last week, which said that we had a modest decrease, which is factually not accurate. And in fact, we had a significant increase after the levy passed. And I made a comment on the Facebook story because I noticed on Facebook that the Pamplin article about this was getting a lot of feedback and attention, and I just interjected that I didn't understand what facts and information actually backed up the statements and assertions in the article. And both the editor that supervises that paper quickly had the reporter reach out to both myself and to some of the Tigard staff, and I believe they actually printed what they told me. The editor called me again today and told me that they printed a rare front page correction of that article. So I haven't seen it yet. My Tigard Times didn't come today, but I'll be interested to see what that says. So Jane, that's a long answer for no, the police budget didn't decrease. It actually increased quite a bit because of the levy approval. There was a Tigard Youth Peer Court some years ago. Do you think it will be brought back? I wonder if during this upcoming school year, due to the pandemic, kids will be out, and how will the city deal with them? Mediation. So the peer court was an invaluable program, and our city recognized, and particularly the city council and the budget committee recognized a couple years ago that while that program was being questioned by some of the staff, that it was a program that was highly valued by our community. Unfortunately, the questions surrounding the program caused the staff that were working in the program to seek other employment before the budget committee could make a decision. And so the program, without a trained staff member assigned to it, that program really couldn't continue as it had been. But it is absolutely something I would like to see brought back, partly because we only spent as a city, we were spending about $50,000 a year on that program, which may seem like a fair chunk of change, but we had lawyers that were acting as judges. We had hundreds of thousands of dollars of volunteer contributions that were being contributed to our community and making our youth and the fabric of our community better, safer, and more effective. So that's what I have to share about the Tigard Youth Peer Court. Let's see. Dane would too very much like to want Steve Street Park. Okay. Thank you, Dane. Appreciate that feedback. What else do we have rolling in? Tigard, you really got nothing else to ask the mayor? Come on. Give me some hardball questions. Oh, Connie. It would be great if we could bring back peer court. I would agree. Absolutely agree. It's a small price to pay for what our community got out of it.
This was a follow-up from...
Oh, we have a follow-up here. Okay.
Peer court.
I know the lady, but forgot her name, who brought me in as a volunteer. Maybe you guys can bring her back. She was great with the kids, the court, and the process. Was that Cheryl? Is that her name? If I'm remembering. What are we going to do about the people who are refusing to wear masks? Well, this question's been asked, and my answer, and not today, so I'm happy to answer it again. But you know, right now it's not a crime to not wear a mask. It is violating the governor's order in many circumstances, and businesses absolutely have a right to control how and what their employees are being exposed to and how their businesses are conducted. What I think the most effective thing to do is to have an educational conversation with folks, and if people are refusing to wear masks and there's a large gathering, that may be handled differently. But again, our focus is on education and trying to politely request compliance, and that's our current approach. Kevin Wright, can you tell us more about what the Tigard Youth Peer Court was? Sounds really interesting. So Kevin, I can tell you, I personally wasn't directly involved in it, but I will share what I know. So the peer court system used kind of a referral process that was typically something that might have landed in either the formal juvenile justice system, or would come from the school resource officers and or the school district as an identified situation that might have ended up being handled in the formal judicial process, and instead was referred to youth peer court program, where youth members of our community would serve on juries and hear these cases, and we had volunteer. I think most of the judges were volunteer lawyers who were kind of practicing and just trying to serve the community as best they could, and so they would adjudicate cases in a non-judicial or a non-formally judicial manner. And it was highly successful. We had, and there are members of our community who participated in much greater detail than me, and I would refer either getting direct answers from the staff to you about specifics and or connecting you with individuals who directly participated in the program. Rachel comments, to Kyle, some people can't wear masks. Okay. Dane, with schools looking to ditch school resource officers, what is the city looking to do with these extra hours for officers? So, a couple things on this. The school district has not made a decision about that. There's going to be a pretty significant effort to, in our community and in the city of Tualatin, with the school district to work through a pretty formal process to have dialogue about that and then come to some decisions. Ultimately, the city police officers are guests of the school district in the school environment, and so ultimately the school board will have the formal authority to make that decision. We fund them, so that is or fund much of them. The school district does pay for part of one of the school resource officers in Tigard, and I think for part of one of the school resource officers in Tualatin. The other thing I will say is that the levy that just passed, this is kind of a detail, if you want to get a little wonky with me for a minute on city budgets and local option levies, the levy that just passed had a school resource officer specifically designated in it. And so with that levy, we don't have an option to use that resource for other means. So if and this is a big if there were a decision made to no longer have a school resource officer program in the future, we would not be able to levy taxes for that purpose out of the levy. So we would either need to lower the levy rate or go back to voters and get permission to do something else with the money. But I think that's very premature to conclude that that's where we're going to end up. Jennifer, traffic is continuing to get worse with the new developments for high density that keep getting applied for and approved. Are there active conversations about how to improve this? So, Jennifer, one of the things that we're really trying to do is to focus dense development in areas that are either currently or will be in the near future served far better with public transportation and have people that can live in an environment where they actually don't need a car, for example. So the Tigard Triangle and downtown Tigard are both examples of where that is our future vision and that we're working towards. Projects that apply for development in Tigard are required to meet our code, and there are parking standards and requirements. Traffic is the number one complaint of residents in Tigard, or at least it was before May of this year. That's maybe changed a little bit, but I think we'll be back to a lot of traffic complaints. So it's something that we're particularly concerned about and continue to try to do what we can. I will also say that we have creative projects that we try to do. Doing road projects is very expensive as well, and the same information I provided earlier about the parks capital improvement program applies to what we can do with major road projects. But passing the transportation package that's on the ballot in November probably is your best bet in having a major impact on the overall transportation system in our area. Let's see, Mary, yes, something needs to be done about traffic. The main streets get backed up and it makes people drive through neighborhoods. Is there any more help that the city can provide to making sidewalks, especially to connect neighborhoods and schools? So sidewalks has been, given that we've for the last 5 years, our mission has been to become the most walkable community in the Pacific Northwest where people of all ages and abilities can live healthy and interconnected lives. So with that as our objective, sidewalks play a major role in that. How to solve, let me give you an idea of the size of the sidewalk problem in Tigard. And by problem, I mean areas where we would want sidewalks and they aren't currently present. About 2 years ago, we did an inventory of how many of those there are and how much it would cost if we wanted to just do all of them at one time. Just to give the city council and our staff an idea of how big of a project it is. So the answer to that question is it's about $120 million worth of sidewalks. Our capital improvement program, at that rate, it could be 50 to 100 years before we, at our current spending rate, where we would be able to do all those sidewalks. So, one member of the city council has actually proposed, this is not me, but I'll share what his proposal has been. His proposal has been to have basically put a sidewalk gap bond on the ballot to fund the $120 million of sidewalks over 30 or 40 years so that we actually get them all done. You can send us feedback about that. That's not something that's being seriously considered right now, and I don't think right now, with the impacts of COVID on both individuals and businesses, that increasing taxes for a $120 million sidewalk gap filling program is the right timing, but we can certainly have more dialogue about that. Jeremy, do you have an estimate of how much revenue the red light speed cameras have generated since being activated? I'm assuming it's a very large amount of money. I don't know the exact dollar figures right now. We had to really prepare for the volume that program was going to experience in the court system and some in police. There's not a ton in police, but an officer does have to review every single citation and make the decision to issue it or not. And then the court system really needed some additional help. So I guess it sounds like you're just asking on the revenue side, not on the expense side. I'm sure the staff can get you an exact number on the amount of revenue. So the staff will follow up with you on that and tell you exactly what that looks like. Let's see. I feel Tigard, like all cities, needs a rec center. Boys and Girls Club are one relatively close to the neighborhood. Unfortunately, from what I know, it's Beaverton. Do you know if Tigard plans on creating one or how we can get something like that started? So I don't know who asked that question, and I don't know how long you've lived in Tigard, but that question was actually put on the ballot in Tigard about 5 years ago, and it to fund that type of a facility, and it was going to be about a $35 million project, and it did not pass. In fact, I think it lost about 70-30. So I think the answer to the question is there either would need to be some sort of significant private investment that makes that happen, which would only happen if there was a financially feasible business model that somebody wanted to invest money in to make that operate, or if there's some sort of a joint program like other cities. Some other cities have. Beaverton's a very different. Both the greater Beaverton area that's served by the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District is a very different animal. They have their own taxing authority. Their tax rate, in fact, just for the Tualatin Hills Park and Rec District, I think is almost up to half of what our whole city permanent tax rate is. So to give you an idea, we've got 7 major areas, including police, that we have to provide, and so that hopefully that gives you some perspective on how Beaverton is funding and operating. It's really not the city, for one, and it's a separate jurisdiction. Some people have brought up, should Tigard join Tualatin Hills Park and Rec District, and we can continue that dialogue. There'd be a very significant capital outlay to do that, and I don't know that that's something even if our voters were willing to pay the current taxes, figuring out how to buy into the capital program would be a major barrier. So hopefully that helps give you some history on that. Jennifer, 99W in the intersection where Costco, Walmart customers cross over and cut through the neighborhoods to get to Fred Meyer really changed our neighborhood. Okay, thank you for that feedback. We'll make sure that we get that. I'm going to guess our traffic engineering staff are not going to be surprised to hear that, but I can make sure that we get that information to them as feedback. Let's see, Arian, for walkable communities, please let me put my invoice. I was able-bodied but now permanently disabled, and someone physically limited or the Aging People with Disabilities Committee could also have some input. I also have a mobility scooter, and there could be some additions for safety. Okay. So that looks so... I'm going to ask our staff to connect you with our team members and staff members that really work on both ADA and trying to make sure that everybody has equal accessibility and accommodations. And thank you for making that comment. Jennifer states there seems to be a lot of empty older commercial real estate along 99W. Is Tigard doing anything to attract companies into the area? That's an interesting question, and it's interesting to me because of the work that, and I didn't mention this earlier about 99W, but on the traffic questions, I should also share that part of the transportation funding measure that I referenced earlier has planning money for 99W to try to figure out what the future of 99W should be and how we can better meet the needs of our community. And that means both road traffic, bike and pedestrian connections, transit, much bigger picture than just cars on road going. And the reason I raise that is one of the observations that's been made and that we're kind of working through is really looking at the current built environment on 99W. The point you made about it's not only empty, but there's also you did comment that it's older, and it's true. It's older, single story, kind of, in some varying states of disrepair in many instances. That needs to look very different in the future, and part of what needs to probably happen, let me share one interesting concept that both our Metro Councilor Craig Dirksen and I have talked about, and that would be that 99W ends up with a more densely built environment that's got new and exciting businesses in it, but that their road frontage and their entry does not front onto 99W, and that's all the exits and entrances on and off of 99W are one of the things that makes traffic worse on 99W. So kind of redesigning where you would have access to the businesses and have them actually face away from 99W and face a sort of a street behind. That's a general concept that is being studied right now. Let's see. Do we have any other questions? I've got a couple reminders for you if you don't have any additional questions. I want to remind everybody the U.S. Census Bureau is ending all counting efforts for the 2020 census on September 30th. I think that might have even been moved up. It is moved up to September 30th. Okay. So make sure you complete your census participation. It is a requirement. Information is confidential. So that's one reminder. Also, I'll remind you again about Councillor Lube and Councillor Newton's next outreach event that will be streaming live like this on Facebook. That is on Thursday, August 20th in the evening. Again, Councillor Heidi Lube and Counselor Liz Newton. And do we have any last moment questions coming in? Otherwise, I am going to give the city participants that have joined us tonight, I want to thank you all, and I will give you a few minutes of your evening back. Thank you again very much for participating. I'll give you about 10 or 20 more seconds to submit any questions, and otherwise we will be off the air. Anything? All right. Good night, Tigard. Thank you.